Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jen Jordan, and I lead content and thought leadership at Insight Partners. I also organize the Scale Up AI conference, which is coming up next Tuesday, November 12th, and features keynotes from Ali K. Miller and Andrew Ng. As a preview to this fantastic conference next week, I'm so excited to introduce this fireside discussion today. We have Workato Chief Go-to-Market Officer Chandar and Insight Partners Operating Partner Gary Survis with us. During our session today, we're pleased to offer you 35% off a virtual ticket for Scale Up AI. The code on the website will appear right here on screen during the chat. With that, please welcome our speakers to the stage. Take it away, Gary.
Thank you so much, Jen, and pleasure to see you, Chandar. I wanted to welcome everyone to our Scale Up AI Soundbites. This is our AI-centric leadership sessions on LinkedIn Live. These are all folks from Insight's portfolio. Chandar representing portfolio company Workato, and wanted to thank you again for being with us and being a sponsor. And this is all in service of our conference coming up next Tuesday, the Scale Up AI conference, which is going to bring together a group of top AI leaders, executives, luminaries, innovators. I will say it is quite a day. So this is wonderful to have you here, and looking forward to our chat.
Gary, it's great to be here once again chatting with you. And it's also very privileged for us to be part of the Insight portfolio. And I can't wait for the event next week. Lots of great things lined up, and looking forward to the event next week too.
Excellent. Well, I thought we would start first and foremost with a term that everyone is hearing a ton about, lots of definitions, and that is the term of an agent. And I would love to hear you give your definition of an agent and a little bit what we are hearing about this agentic economy.
Yeah, it's great. I use the word agentic economy. If you kind of take a step back in the last 12 months, Gary, as you've seen, everybody has been talking agents. You look at all the big publications, and then it's talking about a lot of, there's the avalanche of agent-specific news that's come out on that piece. You couple that on one side, and you look at the software companies themselves that have launched agents. You see anybody from Oracle to ServiceNow, to HubSpot, to Intuit, to Salesforce with agents. Release these agents and their versions. This way I would define an agent. So first of all, if you go look at the Matrix many years ago, some of us Matrix fans, we looked at the agent. That was our first exposure. What is an agent? Even if we saw one, would we recognize an agent? And what we got to know from the Matrix was Agent Smith. The three characteristics that made an agent in that world was someone who was, extremely, obviously, very purpose-driven. Unfortunately, he had a bad purpose, but regardless, he was very purpose-driven. Had, rapid learning, right? There's no latency loop in learning. The learning was instantaneous. And three, the scale of performance. There is no plateau of productivity. The performance is always there. Agent Smith is always on. It's not at 6 p.m. he's feeling tired, right? So you learned that from an agentic. So basically, these agents can help bring the best version of ourselves. Now, Agent Smith was the worst version of himself to do work, but it's the best version of ourselves. And the way to think about this is an agent is an AI-powered assistant with domain expertise. An AI-powered assistant with domain expertise. So you can have an agent in finance, an agent in marketing, an agent in sales, an agent in HR, an agent in customer success, an agent in SDR, et cetera, right? So when we look at the business context, that's the way I would define it, an AI-powered assistant with domain expertise.
That's awesome. And again, I think one of the issues about agents that make it interesting is there are what I'll call dumb agents and smart agents. And part of the difference, I think, is around the context awareness of the agent. And I would love for you to explain a little bit about how an agent derives context and what they do with it.
Yeah, it's a great question. If I look at how do you describe what an agent does, I use the word, think California, CA, context and action. So let's just kind of set it up, right? Let's just say Jenna is a customer support person, and he or she is managing customer support in a fairly sophisticated environment. In that particular case, in Jenna, in this case, would have to triage information. If she's doing customer support action, let's say something ticket comes in, she has to triage the information, look at multiple systems, figure out where the problem is, talk to some people, etc., to get the right context. And then based on the context, Jenna has to take the right actions. And in terms of updating the systems, giving a response, resolving the ticket, et cetera, right? Now, that particular action, context and action, could take a few hours to a few days, depending on the sophistication of the use case. What the agent does is kind of dramatically reduces that latency loop and makes it instantaneous for that context and action. So the way I would think about this is an agent, for this particular case, to get the context and the action, is AI plus an orchestration system. So to get the context, let's just say the agent is assisting Jenna. In this case, the agent is assisting Jenna. The agent, the LLM in this case, can instantly go say, if a ticket comes in, where all do I need to go to triage the information and dynamically produce that? There's nothing preconceived, pre-configured, and all that stuff, right? Once you have that, Jenna can approve it, human in the loop if needed. And then an orchestration, a runtime technology has to execute that, because in the enterprise, it's ELM, right? Enterprise learning, because the data is sitting in all these different places. So it has to get that. So then you have the right context, the information that the agent plus the orchestration. Then the right action is, okay, now I know what to do. The LLM can then say, here is all the things you need to do. You need to go to Zendesk to do this. You go to HubSpot to update this system. You got to go and indicate your critical accounts. You have to send a response, etc. And the orchestration tool executes that. So context is what is needed to get action. And then for both of those, you have the AI LLM working in conjunction with the orchestration technology. That's really how it works, Gary, from our perspective.
So that sounds magical and beautiful. But I'm assuming that there are going to be some challenges companies are going to have to overcome in order to bring this bright new future vision of agents to life. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, look, if you look at spend today that's happening in AI, right? Most of the, I would say 95% plus of spend that is happening is experimental AI. Very few is, production AI spend, right? And if you look at, boards, a lot of companies, I'm on a public company board, you look at a lot of public companies, says, what is our AI story? And large companies are allocating, millions of dollars, depending on the size of the company, and say, let's go try something, a POC or something in AI, right? And a lot of that stuff is experimental. And one of the reasons, because of the challenge here, is the governance piece, right? And because, the CFOs, the CFNO, in many cases say, I can't put these technologies out there that haven't really passed the mustard in terms of the governance for large organizations, the compliance and the governance and the policy controls and all those pieces. So that is going to be a very key factor for this agentic economy to come to life in these enterprise organizations, to get the right governance frameworks, to get the right policy setting, to get the right security policies, and replicate that in these large institutions globally. And the simple way to think about this, Gary, is I've always kind of looked at it and says, what do we mean by this governance action? Let's assume there are 1,000 of us Jennas in this company that I just gave an example of a customer support agent, right? And for 1,000 of those, there are 1,000 agents that are helping them only for customer support. The policy has to be in such a way that the agent cannot access anything Jenna cannot, right? And the agent cannot have access to any systems or any data or any of these different things. So enforcing that, promulgating that throughout the organizations with the right role-based access controls, that technology needs to be mature and need to be get compliance-driven and all those pieces for these agentic models to take off in the enterprise. And that's why we're in the early stages. We are in the top of the first inning, at the bottom of the first inning in this, Gary. We're nowhere in the middle of the game when it comes, if this was a baseball game.
Yeah. I think one thing I just want to step back for one sec and say, at some level, this feels like something I've been doing. I've been using deterministic logic to automate processes for a long time. How does this change now that I have agents? What is the shift that I should be expecting?
The big difference is there is a world of, so first of all, what remains the same is that even if you have these agents in an enterprise, there is still has to be the access to this data sitting in these different complex places and stuff like that, right? So that's why it's not LLM models, it's ELM, it's enterprise learning models, right? That's what I call it. I call it ELM. So that doesn't change. What does change is the real-time nature of this and the dynamic nature of this relative to some of the static processes and workflows that we've all been used to, right? And we've created these static flows, like when we design a process using any system of process system and do integrations or process flows and BPMs and all that. That's all predetermined. It's not, it's so there is a latency loop. If I deploy this, certain things happen in production, I learn from it, and then I go update these models or these processes in traditional world, and there is a latency loop there. And sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes it takes months, depending on the sophistication of it. The big difference is the dynamic nature, because that dynamic nature of this, because this latency loop is completely shrunk, because these models learn in real time. There's nothing pre-configured in it. The LLM instantly creates that. And so that's why it's a game changer in terms of how we can be responsive as an enterprise relative to how we have been. In whatever business function we are, whether in IT or in marketing or sales or whatever, the amount of responsiveness is exponentially higher when these models take off because of that reduction in latency loop and the dynamism of this.
So if I'm understanding, there are going to be lots of agents out there. There'll be agents from your CRM. There'll be agents from the LLM models. There'll be agents running around. How should an organization think about gaining some control over agents run amok, if you will, in an organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have a framework for that, Gary. Thank you for asking that, because it's raining agents, right? I was speaking at a conference the other day, and there was 2 keynote speakers from public companies, and they were announcing their own version of agents. One is in customer support and sales, and one was in the back office, and like it's raining agents everywhere, right? For bring this to life, I think the way companies should think about this is what is the plan of action to bring this to life? I think of this as POA. Let's talk about these 3 letters: plan of action, POA. The first thing they should think about is think processes, not functions, right? When you look at an organization, let's just say that you have agents sitting in sales, or agents sitting in marketing, sales for SDRs, agents for customer support, etc. If you think of it functions, then you get to the same problem in this world as you got in the traditional world, which is who integrates the integrations, which is who brings these agents together. So you have to think holistically as process agents rather than just functional agents. And I'll talk about how you do that. And so, for example, what do I mean by that? If you think of employee onboarding is a task that you want to use an agentic framework, use an agent to do that to make your life much, much, much faster. If you think of it at HR onboarding, then you could use a HR technologist. I got my agent for HR onboarding. But if you think of it as a process, Gary, employee onboarding has a HR component to it, has an IT component to it, which is, you have to go provision your employee in ServiceNow or whatever application you have, or Freshworks or Freshservice. And there is a finance component, which is all the stuff that employee needs to be set up, et cetera, right? Depending on. So if you think about it, that you have to think process agents or technologies that can help tie up these agents at a process level than functional level. Very, very important. That's what you have to think from that perspective. Number one, that's the P. The O, in my mind, is the magic is in the hard middle, orchestration. So you can, all these agents will be sitting there, but the data is sitting in all these hundreds of different systems in an organization. So the magic middle, the O, is about how do you use technology that can serve up what the agents name dynamically with connectivity to all these different applications that are sitting around in your organization. Structured data, unstructured data, on-premise, in the cloud, LLM models, all those things, right? And the A is what I just mentioned earlier, is the agile governance piece, which is very, very important, having framework, hopefully part of the same technology stack, that helps you govern these in such a place that you having these agents, thousands of these agents, operate in a way that is CFO compliant and operationally compliant. That's the way I would think about this, Gary, from a high level.
So I think that's super helpful to understand and have some context, which really raises the question to me about what does it take to be an enterprise grade agent? And one of the things I know about Workato is it's powerful, it is enterprise grade, it's not a toy. Like, what is the difference in your mind between enterprise grade agents and not?
Yeah, to me, I think there are micro agents that are being created across these different applications that are out there today. And if you have to really get scale in an enterprise, you have to think macro agents, agents that can tie up these micro agents at a holistic process level that I talked about. That to me is very, very important from that perspective. That's how you eliminate the siloed problem that you have in organizations today. Otherwise, you're replicating the same problem today. Just to have micro applications, you have micro agents. You have to tie these up. And that to me is very important from an enterprise perspective. The second thing is I talked about the scale that's required to scale across these different parts of the world and the governance that I talked about, right? And having a platform that can provide you that in the single place. And so that is important. For example, there are companies that can give you these agents, but they don't have the underlying orchestration and the governance that I've talked about as part of the same platform. So then what happens is that then you have this ability of, hey, I need to go do all of this using different technologies that adds to the complexity of the stack. And every CIO we are talking to wants stack consolidation and complexity reduction in the reference architecture. Rather now, what is it that three other technologies I'm going to add to the stack now based on the complexity that based on AI? I think that is what to me is enterprise grade, having the ability to span across these processes and yet having the underlying technology a single platform that can help you grade on these two areas of orchestration and governance is something important from my perspective. Not
Yeah,
only mine, from a CIO's perspective.
yeah, and I think that's sort of an interesting point. I mean, I guess you were talking about the matrix agent sort of going awry. Um, what are the safety concerns that we should be thinking about around agents, and what should someone be looking for in terms of a platform to ensure that you're getting the kind of safety that you might expect?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a couple of angles to this, right? Before I get to the platform itself. Look, I gave the framework the right context and the right action. California, CNA, that's what I started with, right? In terms of these agents working. The most important thing in this whole equation is the context part of it. If the context is wrong, the action invariably is wrong. So the Air Canada example happened 1 year ago or so. When someone goes to Air Canada, books a bereavement fare, the agent in that case approved it. And then 2 months later, somebody in the or sometime later, a human in the loop comes in and rejects it to that person, saying, "Yep, that was wrong." And then this person sued Air Canada, and they ended up losing, obviously, and they had to bring that bot down, right? The problem for that, why did that happen, is because the context was wrong. And so the action invariably had turned out to be wrong because the context was wrong. So that's why it is important, first of all, that having a technology that can give you the 360-degree view of a context for solving any particular functional problem is very, very important from that standpoint. Otherwise, you're making a half-baked thing that ultimately drives a decision. And that requires a comprehensiveness of getting the data from all these different applications to create these dynamically. It's all dynamic, but in real time. And the second thing I've talked about is that the role-based security and role-based access control is very, very important in a world that you need to have human in the loop. I don't think these technologies are mature enough that you can have zero human in the loop. From a design perspective, there is some element of human in the loop, depending on the sophistication of what you're trying to do. Maybe some automated tasks may not, but anything that involves a high value customer situation definitely needs some element of human in the loop just to have that point there Canada problem. And then getting ultimately the policy making that I said, those things are very, very important in those spaces from my mind.
So, digging into the human in the loop, clearly a discussion across many different software platforms about what is the role of the human. When Workato looks at the role of the human in product, what are you thinking? How are you thinking about the human's role?
Yeah, I think, look, for us, when it comes to the agentic world, we have ultimately it comes down to choice and flexibility of these models. I think the way we have designed the model in such a way is that it is, as I said, an agent is AI plus orchestration. And in the orchestration, there is an optionality element of having human in the loop in any process, right? And so That flexibility is the way we provide to customers and say, if you're creating an agent in process A, I'm not talking just functional agents, process agents, the employee onboarding agent, right? That's a process agent. The technology enables you to, at any step in this process, whether it's getting the context or the action to get the human in the loop, automatically design that into the process, right? And so that's the way we think about it. Give that flexibility to the customer. Whereas something that's transaction is accounts payable, that's a pure automation process, right? We don't need a human in the loop in that process. So we can optionally take that out and not do that. But more important than not, the way the current maturation of these things are, I think there is an element, the more interactive with an external party this process is, the more the probability of having some sort of human check in the loop and having that flexibility is important from that standpoint. That's the design paradigm that we give the flexibility to customers.
So I want to end on a question about what excites you the most about this agentic future, and what gives you pause?
Yeah, I think, look, the excitement for me is being the best version of ourselves, and every one of us can be the best version of ourselves that this technology can bring to, right? There is no, because if imagine, like, first of all, it helps us be a lot more proactive than reactive. I talked about the customer support example. That's a very defensive game because somebody's actually called you and told you have a problem. But think about changing that to an offensive game where you proactively know that NPS score went down in real time, or that POS failed, or the Snowflake, the customer adoption data went down. So the ability to be a lot more responsive and proactive and without having any plateau of productivity is significant. The best version of ourselves. That is exciting. To me, the downside is that there's a lot of hype around this, and it is still experimental AI. It is still not actionable AI based on some of these things I talked about. So you're going to go through this typical hype, as what Gartner would call it. We are in the peak of whatever. It goes into the plateau, and it ultimately goes to the plateau. There's some disillusionment. It is the peak of inflated expectations. It comes down in the plateau of productivity. That is the cycle. We're right at the early part of the cycle. I think we just have to get used to it. Is that it's probably the internet technology in 94, 95. There's a lot of expectation. It kind of falls, and then it settles down, right? So that's why I think time is the factor that makes me think that we are still early and we still haven't completely grasped the power of it from my perspective.
Well, Chandar Pattabhiram, awesome Chief Go-to-Market Officer at Workato. Thank you so much for being here. Super excited to have you as a sponsor again for our Scale Up AI conference, and appreciate your time.
Gary, it's so awesome to be here and talk to you, and looking forward to the conference next week. And once again, very, very privileged to be part of the Insight.